crown for king.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're examining the 20 most brutal deaths in history.
I am no witch! You'll burn in hell!
For this list, we'll be looking at the most barbaric and physically painful ways specific individuals have died or been killed. Which of these horrifies you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Blackbeard. Englishman Edward Teach is perhaps better known by his nickname Blackbeard. Blackbeard terrorized the seas of North America in the early 18th century with his ship Queen Anne's Revenge. But his notorious adventures came to an end on November 22, 1718. The governor of Virginia had ordered Blackbeard's capture, and he was attacked by Lieutenant Robert Maynard and his crew. According to Maynard himself, quote, "He fell with 5 shot in him and 20 dismal cuts in several parts of his body. His body was carelessly thrown into the water, and his head was attached to the bowsprit of Maynard's ship. It then stood for several years in Chesapeake Bay as a public warning against piracy." Timothy Treadwell.
In all the faces of all the bears that Treadwell ever filmed, I discover no kinship, no understanding, no mercy.
You may love nature, but nature does not love you back. Timothy Treadwell was a fervent bear enthusiast.
I must hold my own if I'm going to stay within this land. For once there is weakness, they will exploit it, they will take me out.
He started an organization to help protect bear habitats, and then he lived amongst them in Alaska's Katmai National Park. But his devotion to these wild animals would be his downfall. Treadwell was camping with his girlfriend Amy Huguenard when they were attacked by a massive brown bear. Treadwell's camera was on at the time, and it captured the audio of his demise. This audio has never been released, but listeners have provided descriptions that are horrific enough.
Truly, you must never listen to this.
I know, Werner. I'm never going to.
Both the camera and the couple's remains were found the next day. Gordon Moffat. This Scottish man from the town of Buckhaven was working on an oil rig when he suffered a gruesome demise. Moffat was dangling from a harness that was fed through a mouse hole, a small hole from which the harness cable spools, measuring 10 to 12 inches in diameter. The winch pulled Moffat towards the mouse hole at a speed of 11 inches per second, and his body was forced through. The official cause of death was crush asphyxiation and multiple injuries. The drilling company was fined £60,000 for the debacle. Deborah Stone. Between 1974 and 1988, Disneyland had an attraction called America Sings. This was a rotating theater that contained a bunch of singing animatronic animals. The attraction was open for just 9 days before tragedy struck. An employee named Deborah Stone was in the wrong position when the stage began to move. As a result, she was crushed between the rotating and the stationary walls. Stone reportedly screamed, but theatergoers thought it was part of the show. Luckily, one audience member thought otherwise and went to get help. Unfortunately, Stone was already dead by the time they arrived. The Byford Dolphin Incident. A drilling rig that operated in the North Sea, the Byford Dolphin saw its share of accidents. The most dreadful occurred on November 5, 1983. 6 men were working inside a diving chamber, which is meant to hold people underwater. This chamber requires significant pressurization to protect the inhabitants from the ambient pressure of the deep sea. Unfortunately, a dive tender named William Cramond prematurely opened the clamp before the chamber was correctly pressurized. A massive, uncontrolled decompression occurred, killing 5 of the 6 men. Their blood boiled, and one of them was forced through an extremely narrow opening. Ferdinand Magellan. A world-famous explorer, Ferdinand Magellan died on April 27, 1521, at the age of 41. Magellan was exploring what is now the Philippines when he encountered fierce resistance from a local tribe. The 2 parties engaged in the Battle of Mactan, which resulted in a decisive Mactan victory. It also resulted in the death of Ferdinand Magellan. Magellan was storming the beach with his men when he was hit by spears. He was also cut on the leg, and when he collapsed, was pounced on by numerous Mactan men. What remained was kept as a war trophy by Mactan chief Lapu-Lapu. Shaun Doyle. New York medical examiner Judy Melanik calls Shaun Doyle's death the worst she has ever seen. Doyle went out drinking with his friend Michael Wright and Wright's girlfriend. Perhaps inebriated, Wright made the assumption that Doyle was hitting on his partner. He attacked Doyle and threw him down a manhole. Unfortunately, a main had broken, and at the bottom lay a pool of boiling water. Doyle did not die instantly. Unfortunately, responders were not able to enter the manhole owing to the incredible heat, and Doyle didn't make it. Jon Jones. An amateur spelunker, Jon Jones was exploring Utah's Nutty Putty Cave with his brother on the night of November 24, 2009. Jones came across what he thought was the infamous birth canal passageway. However, Jones's estimation was a bit off, and he entered an unmarked opening measuring 10 by 18 inches. Jones was traversing the passage when he got stuck upside down.
He has since slid back into that original position with his head down at a 60 or 70-degree angle, so a very uncomfortable spot.
He remained upside down for the next 28 hours. Rescuers tried to save Jones, but there was nothing they could do with the size and geography of the passage. Jones's body eventually failed from being upside down for so long, and he went into cardiac arrest. Cato the Younger. A prominent opponent of Julius Caesar, Cato the Younger was a powerful Roman senator. His policies indirectly led to Caesar's civil war, which lasted from 49 to 45 BCE. Caesar emerged victorious, and rather than beg for forgiveness or pardon, Cato decided to end his own life. Cato grabbed a sword while having dinner and drove it into his stomach. According to the Greek historian Plutarch, Cato was quickly seen to by a physician. When Cato regained consciousness and realized that his attempt had failed, he tore open the stitches and finished the job. As gross as this is, there's a chance that Plutarch greatly exaggerated the story. Arthur Aston. An English army officer, Arthur Aston fought for King Charles I during the English Civil War, which raged for 10 years between 1642 and 1652. Aston took part in the Siege of Drogheda, which saw him protecting the coastal Irish town from the invading Oliver Cromwell and his parliamentarians. Cromwell emerged victorious and laid waste to Drogheda, killing soldiers and civilians alike. Aston was confronted at Millmount Fort and killed after surrendering. It's reported that parliamentarian soldiers grabbed Aston's heavy wooden leg and beat him to death with it. He was one of the nearly 4,000 casualties that occurred during the siege. Julius Caesar. Serving as the dictator of Rome between 49 and 44 BC, Julius Caesar went out in dramatic fashion. Caesar's senators feared that he was growing too tyrannical and was no longer fit to lead the Roman Republic.
You were going to consider revoking my brother's exile.
I'm still considering it.
As a result, they committed what they saw as tyrannicide and killed Caesar in the Curia of Pompey. On March 15, 44 BC, Caesar was stabbed a total of 23 times, and the resulting autopsy theorized that he had died from severe blood loss.
What are you waiting for? No! No!
Despite the numerous stabbings, it's believed that only one of the wounds proved fatal. Caesar's wildly dramatic death was turned into the subject of theater and immortalized in Shakespeare's famous play. Giles Corey.
Are you protecting Satan? Confess, you did see attacking spirits!
No! I only thought I saw them, but I did not!
In the late 1600s, hundreds of people in colonial Massachusetts were accused of witchcraft, and many were killed.
I am no witch! You'll all burn in hell!
A farmer named Giles Corey had it pretty darn bad. Corey was accused of witchcraft, but refused to enter a plea. When this happened, the accused would be subjected to a form of torture called peine forte dure. Corey was laid on the ground and large rocks were placed on top of him. The hope was that the increasing weight would cause so much pain that Corey would eventually cave and enter a plea.
What say you, Corey? More. Wait.
Lay on.
But Corey remained silent, and the accumulative weight slowly but surely crushed him to death. The Brazen Bull.
They're in the bull!
Modern historians aren't sure if the Brazen Bull really existed, but it is extensively referenced by an ancient Greek historian named Diodorus Siculus. Siculus wrote about the Brazen Bull in his famous work Bibliotheca Historica. Back in the 500s BC, the city of Acragas, Sicily, was ruled by the tyrant Phalaris. As the story goes, a man named Perilos made the Brazen Bull for Phalaris as a new method of execution. A condemned criminal would climb inside the hollow bronze bull, and a fire would be lit directly underneath it. The interior of the bull would then gradually increase in temperature, and the criminal inside was slowly roasted to death. Their screams would then be heard as bull sounds from the outside. David Douglas. A famous botanist from the 19th century, David Douglas is the namesake for the Douglas fir tree of western North America. After traversing the Pacific Northwest, Douglas made his way to Hawaii, and it was here that he would die. Douglas was climbing a dormant volcano called Mauna Kea when he fell into a trapping pit meant for wild cattle. While inside the pit, Douglas was mauled and trampled to death by a wild bull. Not a great way to go. However, suspicion also fell on a local hunter named Edward Gurney. Gurney was the last person to see Douglas alive, money was missing from Douglas's body after it was recovered, and it was Gurney's pit into which Douglas supposedly fell. St. Lawrence. A Christian martyr, St. Lawrence was a Roman deacon under Pope Sixtus II, who served for just 1 year between 257 and 258 AD. The Roman Emperor Valerian persecuted Christians and ordered the execution of its leaders. As a result, many prominent Christians were killed in August of 258, including Pope Sixtus II and St. Lawrence. Legend has it that Lawrence was placed on a gridiron over some coals and essentially cooked to death. As a result, he's now the patron saint of chefs.
I should be salted and grilled with a sprinkle of sage.
This account was recorded by a poet named Prudentius and St. Ambrose of Milan. However, some modern historians contest this story, arguing instead that Lawrence was decapitated like Pope Sixtus II. William Wallace.
William Wallace? Can't be. Not tall enough.
Born in 1270, William Wallace has become immortalized in pop culture thanks to Mel Gibson and his seminal film Braveheart. After fighting for Scottish independence, Wallace was named Guardian of Scotland and eventually convicted of high treason by King Edward I of England.
That they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Wallace was sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. We won't get into the specifics, but suffice to say, quartered is exactly what it sounds like. Following the incredibly graphic and painful execution, Wallace, or what was left of him, was made an example of atop London Bridge. Things were done very, very differently back then. Yorgia Doja. Medieval Europe was filled with revolts and uprisings, and Yorgia Doja of Transylvania led one of them. In the early 1500s, Doja led a peasants' rebellion against the nobility of the Kingdom of Hungary. He and his soldiers fought well, but they didn't stand a chance against the kingdom's massive army. Doja was eventually captured, and his execution was crafted to mock his ambitions. Doja was placed on a scalding iron throne and forced to wear a smoldering crown.
A crown for a king.
He was then made to witness the execution of his own brother. And while Doja was still alive, his body, shall we say, provided sustenance for other prisoners of war. That must have made for one hellish sight.
I'll have fries with that.
Hisachi Uchi. Radiation sickness is an extraordinarily painful way to go. And while most people remember disasters like Chernobyl and Fukushima, the worst nuclear-related death started in the Japanese village of Tokai. On September 30th, 1999, technician Hisachi Uchi was blasted with an enormous amount of radiation. Following the accident, Uchi immediately felt sick and grew disoriented. While at the hospital, it was discovered that the incident had essentially destroyed Uchi's immune system and that it was only a matter of time before he died. But his family insisted that the doctors do everything they could, so they kept Uchi alive for months, despite his body literally withering away. After numerous resuscitations, Uchi finally died of a massive heart attack. Grigori Rasputin.
Rasputin!
Rasputin!
This man has a reputation for being incredibly hard to kill, a reputation that is buoyed by the likes of the animated Anastasia movie and that super catchy Boney M song. Rasputin was a supposed mystical healer who found himself in the social circles of Russian nobility. Accounts of his last stand are exaggerated, but yes, he certainly did experience a prolonged and painful death.
Time to dance on your graves.
First, he ate cake and drank wine that had been laced with cyanide. Nothing happened. Conspirators dropping pretenses, he was then shot in the chest. He collapsed, but ultimately survived. It took 2 more shots, including one to the head, to finally put Rasputin down for good. His body was subsequently dumped into the Malayanevka River in St. Petersburg.
You said yourself I hit him in the head. Rasputin, this guy.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Balthazar Gerard. In March of 1580, King Philip II of Spain offered a sizable reward for the head of William of Orange. William was the leader of the Dutch revolt against Spain and one of the main instigators of the 80 Years' War. This bounty was answered by a man named Balthazar Gerard, who killed William on July 10, 1584. In response, Gerard was tortured and executed. The methods of torture were extraordinarily harsh, even for the time. The ordeal is way too graphic to be conveyed, but it consists of 300-pound weights, fire, branding, flaying, and sharp nails. Gerard was finally put out of his misery in the market square on July 14th, having suffered what is probably the worst death in human history.